Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this session on fastest and safest path to enterprise generative AI. Today, I have with me Bo Rankin from Baptist Health. We'll introduce him in a second. I'm Arijit Sengupta, founder and CEO of Aible. Before this, I started something called Beyond Code, which became Salesforce Einstein Discovery. Wrote a book called AI is a Waste of Money. That led to Harvard Business School bringing me in to co-create and co-teach the first AI course in the MBA program at Harvard. Bo, over to you.
Thanks, Arjit. Yeah, so Bo Rankin, Director of Analytics and Decision Intelligence, Baptist Health, South Florida. I have 20 years in data science, visualization, data engineering, mostly in the hospitality industry, and recently came over to healthcare at Baptist. And it's been a great place to apply my academic background and my experience in industrial engineering, operations research, MBA and organization development and change. And so this has been a great experience and excited to share with you what we've done here at Baptist.
Thank you, Bo. And before we dive into what Bo did with to unlock the value of his data using AI and generative AI, first, very quickly, what the heck do we mean by fastest path to enterprise generative AI? First part is Aible gets implemented in the customer's own cloud in 15 minutes. That is how data doesn't leak out of the customer's control. And this is very important in healthcare, especially. Second, we focused on delivering new use cases in a matter of minutes. How do you go from raw data to something useful completely automatically? Third, fantastic day zero experience with Palm, GPT, Titan, etc. What you'll find is these things demo wonderfully well, and they're really good when they're making stuff up, which is what you experience with something like ChatGPT online. But when you're trying to make it work on your enterprise data without the right kind of prompt augmentation, without the right kind of settings, you get stuff that is just made up and not based on your data. So we focused on getting that day zero experience really strong for the customers. And the last part is immediately when users give feedback, their AI experience changes in Aible. Whereas in most other organizations, when you give feedback, that gets collected by data scientists, and eventually weeks and months later, the model gets updated based on thousands of feedback points. So you lose that immediate feedback cycle, which actually helps people give better feedback. And then we monitor the user behavior, who's giving feedback, who's undoing their feedback, what are the use cases that are getting a lot of positive feedback, and then we can focus our attention on the identified really good use cases. But let's start with Bo and unlocking the value from your data with AI. So Bo, you want to tell them a little bit about the beginning of your journey, and you have been using us for almost a year, if I'm not wrong. What has been your experience? How did you get going? What was the lessons learned?
Yeah, sure thing, Arjit. So we've been through a couple different phases in our use of Aible. The first was the hammer and the nail approach, where we said, we've got this great new tool, let's see what we can apply it to. And so one of the things that came through was a sleep study. And this was really important to some of our leaders in the cardiology department. And we collected all this data and ran it through Aible, and it found some really surprising patterns. And they said, this is fantastic. We need to publish it as a white paper. And so that's underway. But where it really didn't gain the level of attention that we needed, because healthcare is challenged. Our costs are rising and our revenues are staying flat or falling. And so what really needs attention right now is we need a shift in our fundamentals, our business fundamentals. And so fortunately, our bread and the butter the past year has been a command center initiative, and we've built over 250 KPIs on, it'll be 31 dashboards at the end of the month, and across 10 different domains. And so that has, it's all fully governed. From the very beginning, we worked with our business leaders to say, what are your most important KPIs? How do you want to define them? And then we developed to them, did the whole data governance, and deliver this certified product that they were able to validate every single edge case. And so, essentially, we've taken those curated data sets, dropped them into Aible, and again, it's finding some really cool, surprising patterns that would have taken us weeks or months, or we would have never even thought to analyze, and it just pops off the page. So this is where it's coming out of that initiative. We're having this whole conversation around, great, you've delivered these dashboards and these KPIs, but we need to get value out of them. And so this is where Aible comes in. And so, one of the examples, in surgery as an example, when we first ran it through, we ran first case on time starts through Aible, and it found first thing it did was create 13,000 graphs. Right? We would have never done that in Tableau. And then it said, on top of that, it says, and here's the 6 graphs that really matter. And we're having some really dynamic conversations with our business leaders about how do we transform their business fundamentals. It also is really cool because we just click, at the end of the analysis, we click download PowerPoint, and it puts in this nice natural language, or pretty close. We have to, put it in our own voice, but it makes it really easy just to take that analysis and share it with business leaders and have these really dynamic conversations about how to improve their business.
So what I'm hearing you say is like dashboards were very helpful on agreeing on the KPI and understanding what has happened. And what's Aible is helping you to understand is why it has happened and what can I do about it. Is that a fair summary of what you said?
Yeah, absolutely. So like for the surgery, as an example, we were able to show, when we had no idea what we were going to get, but it says, the primary physician on the surgery is a big driver behind whether the first case of the day is going to start on time or not. And for no-show rates, you see that listed here for our primary care physicians. It's looking at specific locations and physicians and patient types and patient behaviors that are driving that no-show rate. Again, that we would have been able to take a stab at it, but it's just gut feel. Now it's very definitively saying, work here first, work here next, work your way down the list of these are the most impactful things that impact your business.
And another key lessons learned I heard you say, and correct me if I'm wrong, is starting from the technology was actually the wrong thing to start from. It's not the hammer looking for the nail. Starting from what are the business KPIs that matter, and then unlocking the business users by using technology. So empowering that business user was the key difference in getting success versus, hey, I got a cool tech that I can play around with. Is that a fair statement?
100%. Yeah. So coming out of this, now that we're at the end, we're sharing, okay, here's your latest version of the dashboard. And by the way, if you want help analyzing this, we can do that. And they go, yes, we need an hour and a half, 2 hours to like dive into this. And that's the type of conversations we're having now, that they instantly see it and they say, yes, we need help. We've been hunting and pecking, clicking through all the dashboards, but and we did our best to make the information pop and easy to find. But doing this analysis offline really just puts it into overdrive and finds it for them and says, focus here, ignore the rest.
And we'll come back to this in the generative AI part, but that is a place where instead of you having to spend 2 hours, pretty soon with generative AI, they can do it themselves because the generative AI will translate for them. So that's going to be a very interesting time. But I do wanted to dive in on some examples of KPIs people can start from, right? They're watching this session right now. What I often get asked is, what do I start from? So here are some examples, just so everybody knows, these are not Bo's specific examples that he's working on. These are just things that we think are good places to start from. Bo, if you would like to walk them through some of these, and I'll keep building.
Sure, yeah. So for primary care, we actually identified 27 different KPIs and metrics. Not everything's a KPI, right? A key performance indicator. But we identified 27 and we built it in a really elegant infographic type style dashboard. And then it tells the story of how they arrived at their utilization. And so for this one, at the end of that, we said, okay, this is great. You now know your story. what pops off the page? Which are the top 3 or 4 that you want to run through Aible? And they instantly said, seen within 14 days, cancellation within no shows, slot utilization. I'm sorry, cancellations and no shows and slot utilization. They said, we want to focus on those 4, create strategic initiatives around them. For imaging, we're going through it as well. And they, so we have both, imaging, we look at it as both capacity, so the scheduling type dynamics, as well as efficiency, the machine utilization. And so for that capacity, it's very similar to primary care, where it's cancellations, no shows, percent empty slots, which is essentially the same as slot utilization. And then turnaround time between machine, on the machine. So like, how much time was the machine busy? How much turnover time did you have between procedures? What's the utilization? Surgery, going through again, we have a whole strategic initiative to reinvent our KPIs, actually based on built on the, ours as the first iteration. And so now where we're focusing around is building on what we already did. And we're saying number of cases, first case on time starts. So that's the first case of the day. Did it start on time or not for every room? Prime time turnover rate. That's those are kind of the 3 that they want to focus on.
And then this one is actually where a lot of Aible customers get started in the provider space is financial. So we go in and look at their claim denials, their appeals of claim denials, because quite often we'll find that there's there's hundreds of claims being appealed, whereas the numbers might be much higher that should have been appealed. And often it's a matter of having the resources to go in and do the work and understanding which claims are probably likely to get paid upon appeal. So we do a lot of work there because the ROI becomes very easy to calculate. Hey, I got paid on more claims because I figured out what my underlying patterns were, or I got more appeals through because Aible helped me figure it out. But you have a bunch of others as well, Bo. What are the other things in this space?
Yeah, sure. So, really, where our finance and case management are kind of separate for us, where finance is looking at a high level payer mix, revenue, case mix, those resonate, length of stay, admissions, and so that's kind of where finance looks. And then case management, of course, they obviously have a very close relationship, but case management is around the claims. They're also focused on length of stay. And so, this really resonates with us as well.
And workforce management and operations, again, in the interest of time, I was lumping stuff together, but nurse and physician retention is turning out to be a very important use case for us. And with the amount of burnout going on in this space, that is becoming a common thing we're helping hospitals with. But Bo, what you would like to add to this?
Absolutely, yeah. So I think the way that you group them here is fine. It helps. It sees the 2 sides of the coin. Operations, we think of it more as efficiency of operations. What's our bed utilization? What's our bed occupancy? What's the length of stay on those beds for both observation and inpatient? Number of admits and discharges for observation and inpatient. Right? So that's how we think about it in the hospital and the emergency department admits and hospitalization from emergency department admission rate. And then workforce management, of course, that's your staff that's there to serve those patients, treat those patients, and your nurses and your physicians. But on our HR partners in workforce management, they look at contractor mix, terminations, total headcount, vacancy rates, labor cost. So very, this is, while they're 2 separate, I think it's important to call out. We have 10 areas, so this doesn't even list all the different areas, and certainly nowhere near the 250 KPIs. But this is a great place to to really start where we started going with Aible.
And the reality is most of our customers get started. This is a good place for you to start. Like, take your favorite 3 metrics and just get going, right? But one of the interesting things you'll find as you start doing a lot of this is certain patterns start emerging cross functions. And this is really interesting because what we often find is people don't talk across silos, and often they don't look at their dashboards across silos. But when the same patterns start showing up, that is actually a very interesting thing an automated analysis can find. And that can lead to some systematic problems that you can identify and eliminate, which affects multiple KPIs at the same time. Now, let's talk about where you're going to next. So we talked about how you can use automated analytics and AI to figure out what's driving patterns, what are the most important things to look at. But then the problem is you have to go have those meetings with the business stakeholders to translate that. And this is a place where we found generative AI can be very helpful to empower the business users to understand these concepts. So Bo, you very recently started this journey. I was with you when we first did the first use of Aible on your data. Do you want to tell them a little bit about what the process was and what your experience was?
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. First of all, yeah, as you mentioned, that we just got our hands on it, and it's been my first impression was how easy it was to get started. We've got this body of work in Aible, and it was a matter, right? So like we started with first case on time starts, and it was a matter of just click chat, and it launches the dialogue. You ask a question, and it starts loading up. And so it was that simple. It actually took us dramatically longer than that, right? We're talking about a month to get it through security, or maybe longer to get it through security and installed and all that stuff, right? But then once it was there, it was just trivial to get started. And so yeah, it was the output was really it was how do I describe it? I guess it was, so number one, I guess let's acknowledge the hallucinations, right? So that's part of it. But what's really cool is that what's highlighted in blue, is a fact, and what's highlighted in black is the creative part, right? And so it is using all the data that we loaded, those KPIs that I mentioned, and it finds the patterns. And so one of the things that was really surprising was it knew FCOTS. It just said, the variable FCOTS, this is defined as first case on time starts. And I didn't provide that context anywhere. I didn't define that anywhere. The generative piece just said, we know that this is first case on time starts, and it provided context around it. I found that the storytelling was a little too creative for what we're trying to do, right? My pipe dream is that I'm able to drop the data in and it creates a white paper, like I mentioned for the sleep study. But what we're really focusing on now is creating a quarterly report. And so that's using more business terms to summarize all of our KPIs and turn it into something that execs want to read. And so, we do need to take that output. It's a great foundation, right? So it summarizes it, and then we take that and we put it into our voice, and we need to build our own quarterly report, but it's a great place to start.
And remember, we did put it on storyteller mode.
Yes.
That's the prompt setting. So one of the things we do is create the Baptist voice, for example, right? So you might have liked the business user voice or the bullet point list better. I like storyteller because it's fun, right? Like I also play around with Samuel L. Jackson just because it's end of day fun to have him swear at me. We do star out the swears, by the way. But the point here is each organization will want to dial in their own voice. And generative AI is good at that. You create that guidance to it and it'll produce it the way you want it. And in fact, not just one voice, you might want a different voice for executives, different voice for research papers, different voice for physicians, and that's very easy to set up in generative AI. The other thing, Bo talked about this, the fact that generative AI can figure out what concepts are being talked about. So think about how we have done analytics till date. We would always set up our data dictionaries first. Get your data exactly right first. The place where the combination of automated analytics and generative AI will start getting us is when you point it at the data, it'll come in and say, hey, here are some issues with your data. You might want to exclude this, you might want to keep this, etc. But it also automatically understands the context of the data. Now, it will not be perfect. It will be like 90%, 80% of the way. We were just working with a telco, and the generative AI didn't understand the word jitter, which is a very specific meaning in that organization. Once we understood the problem, we could provide that to the generative AI in the template saying, in this organization, jitter means this. And that will happen. That just like because it figured out FCOTS doesn't mean it can figure out everything. But when it doesn't, if the user provides feedback, it learns and gets better. That is the important part of generative AI. The faster you can get it in the hands of users and start getting their feedback, the better it will be. Sorry, well, I interrupted you, but hopefully that
was perfect. And while you were talking, I was thinking we've had that same experience with other vendors where they said, well, you can do generative AI in your enterprise, but you're going to have to do a whole bunch of work in the data warehouse and the data catalog. And that wasn't our experience at all with Aible. It was literally just, here's your data set, run generative AI on it, and it was immediately relevant. And there was zero data warehousing work that had to be done. It was just we had to write the queries and get the data curated, but it was a completely different model from other solutions we've been talking about.
And there's a reason for it. We fundamentally believe that there'll be hundreds and thousands of use cases for generative AI in the organization. Like 2 years from now, we'll look at generative AI and say, this is a new user interface. Now, imagine if you had to set up something every time you wanted to use a user interface. That doesn't make any sense. So we have really focused on that automation. How do you get users to value in a matter of minutes? How do you automate all the skills so that the best practices are encoded in the product, right? And then users can adjust it. As we said, the language might need to be adjusted. It's adjustable. But the best practices, like getting people to value as quickly as possible. Without that, generative AI is not going to be something you give to 5 people and 10 use cases. It's not going to be that. It's going to be something everyone will use, and they'll have new use cases every day. If your setup is heavy, if it's training heavy, Bo got no training, by the way. It was literally, we were on a call. I'm like, Bo, you want to turn it on? Press that button, right? And he was off and running, using it. The next meeting, from what I understand, Bo, you went and presented to your executives without anybody from Aible on the call. So you felt comfortable enough to do that. But that's the point, like no setup, no training. That's how you need to unlock the human potential for using generative AI.
Yeah. Can I just add one more thing about Please. One of the things that I recently discovered as well that I think is really promising for turning this over to our business users. I'm not sure, when I did that presentation, again, this is just Friday, the reaction was, I don't know if we want to give this to our business users, but I would put the natural language query in front of them where they can say, tell me, where is, and now I've kind of put myself out of the dashboard business where they can get whatever question answered that they want right on the data itself. And they don't have to go, where was that dashboard again? It was just, hey, I want to know, give me a top 10 list of the best on-time physicians, or tell me where are the, which facilities struggle with the highest no-show rate. They can just ask that question. It spits out a graph, and it provides the SQL if you wanted to give it to one of your developers to drop into a dashboard. You could say, okay, now productionize this. But that was one thing I recently discovered that I think is really closely related, where we would give it to our business users and put it directly in their hands.
So we are actually seeing that as an adoption bridge, because what is happening is a lot of these customers are used to dashboards, and their biggest complaint about dashboards have been, oh my God, I need 2,000 dashboards because every time I want a slight edit, that's one more dashboard that has to be made and maintained. So turning it into, here is a good starting point dashboard, and the queries and the responses are right there in the dashboard. So you can use it as examples for the questions you can ask, because you're both giving them something of value to them in a form that is familiar, but you're also giving them 10, 20 examples on the screen that they can copy and paste into the query and change themselves. And that new dashboard becomes their dashboard. They don't need to go back to IT and say, hey, now I need you to maintain this version for me, right? So I do think these kind of bridging functions, like start from the familiar and then show them the power of the new technology, is more useful than saying, hey, do something completely different. And that's where those generated dynamic dashboards will be very valuable. In the interest of time, I'll move on to a quick explanation of what we are doing differently, because clearly we are doing something differently. One of the things is we basically said we don't want AI made by the few for the many. If this is truly going to be transformative, if everybody will be doing it, there cannot be a lot of upfront work by experts before the value is unlocked. So if you're doing in most tech stacks, there's a bunch of different tech that you have to get working together. There are a bunch of different personas that have to come together before the business user can get their hands on it. These projects are often taking 3 months or more. And because it becomes a top-down project, there are very few use cases getting pushed out. By the time there's a huge project backlog, by the time it gets into the hands of the users, a lot of effort has gone into it, but the typical adoption rate for AI at scale is actually still closer to 10%. So a lot of wasted effort before users get their hands on it. The risk of hallucinations is the big concern, where it just makes up facts. You heard Bo talk about it. In Aible, we show that this part is true and that part is not from your data. Incorporation of user feedback. Because they're doing reinforcement learning, etc., it takes a lot of time, and often thousands of users' feedback is getting incorporated at the same time. So users don't know which feedback was valuable and which was not. And finally, because these models are constantly changing, like if your project is taking 3 months, there is almost 3 generations of models that have probably happened in those 3 months. So you're always a couple of generations behind if your projects take 3 months. What Aible did is we said, look, can we just take all of this tech and give almost like an iPad view of the world? It just works. Multi-cloud, multi-model, structured, unstructured, graph data, doesn't matter. It just works. The business user can get their hands on it immediately and start getting value in a matter of minutes. 15 minutes to set up in the customer's cloud, minutes to the first project. You were hearing Bo talk about how we went to the project in minutes. But when you have this bottoms-up process where people can just try things, try it on structured data, try it on unstructured data, you can enable thousands of projects. That automated hallucination double check for structured and unstructured gives people the confidence that this is based on my data and that is made up by the general knowledge of the generative AI. The immediate incorporation of user feedback. People actually don't know how to give feedback to AI yet. And there are famous stories like the Tay chatbot from Microsoft, where the users provided really bad feedback to turn the AI into a racist, crazy thing. What you're doing here is when the user provides feedback, they can see the impact on the AI. And then you can take the right feedback after observing it across users and use it to transform the AI for everyone. And finally, as models change in the Aible world, you just change the prompt template, the chat template, the settings, and all of a sudden the technology just starts working with a new version. In Aible, you can switch from GPT to PaLM, vice versa, without affecting your use case at all. So that's what we focused on. How do you simplify this and truly make this a bottoms-up approach? Bo, anything you'd like to add to that?
No, well, yeah, I think what resonates here for me was we don't have this massive data engineering group or effort. We don't really have data scientists, but the quality and the speed that they're able to produce and the real-time nature of being able to have this dialogue with our business users, we just have, it's all built with a bunch of, with a handful of folks that have the ability to write some SQL and are conversant in data and have some client skills. And so it just really helps, has helped accelerate our use of the data.
And thankfully, the SQL part will go away soon with the NLQ capability you just started playing around with. This is an example from OpenX. This kind of technology, 2 days from scratch, billions of rows of data, millions of variable combinations, completely automatically, start to end of project, 2 days. And there are many such case studies that you can see. In fact, here's some key landmines you should look at when you do the generative AI thing. First is don't wait to get started. The user feedback is really crucial. This tech is exponentially advancing. If you don't get your experience with it now, it'll be too late because your competitors will be too far ahead of you. Expensive manual orchestration is a bad sign. If you're doing a manual project, it's tech debt because you're going to delay everything by months and then the tech has moved on. If you're going to govern, you want to observe user behavior. Like we look for anomalous prompts, we monitor users, use cases, models across clouds. Have that kind of observation mindset and create a safe space. So basically everything running in the customer's VPC under their control, no data leaving. So you have to think about a different way of governing than just process. And hallucinations, you can't really eliminate hallucinations, but you can confirm what insights came from the actual data. Bo talked about that before. There are lots of customers like this that we have proof cases from Sienna, Cisco, OpenX, others. Again, ability to answer millions of questions of the data, but the cost to set it up was very, very low. The speed was very high because we have set it up so that completely automatically we can go from their data and the ability to answer questions. Bo, anything else you would like to add?
Well, I think it's my what I hope you take away from my quote here is that, and what I hope you've extracted from what we've talked about so far is that essentially we've used Aible to be rocket fuel for getting value from our from all this the data and from the KPIs that we've produced. It makes it so easy to have the conversation with the business. It makes it so easy to find patterns that we would have never thought to look at. All those, not just the primary factors, but all the interaction effects that also are really powerful. And it just makes it so easy to discover that and turn it into value. So.
And don't just listen to Bo. You can go to Gartner peer review and you'll see 5-star reviews from multiple customers with some of these kind of quotes. A lot of companies are already using Aible. We would like to get you involved. Please start asking your questions. We'll try to answer as many questions as we can in this webinar. Thank you very much, Bo. Really appreciate your time. And I look forward to the questions.
Thanks for having me.
Okay.